right? Heard a couple amens. I'm going to take that too. Take what I can get tonight. All right. So I told you a little Sunday school lesson. You know, we've been going through the sins that are listed in especially the New Testament, and you know, a lot of them we can just look at them and say, okay, that's what this means. Some of them we've had to dig a little bit deeper, and we've found some other things that we can kind of bring out and try to help you with. Well, I normally start with 3 and kind of make that my limit. And I started with 3, and I have about 1 point on each one of them. So I went to 4 and 5 and 6, and I'm up to 7. And believe it or not, I am all on one page, Brother David. No 45-minute introduction. Somebody say, pray the Lord right there. And y'all figure out what I just said. You'll get it in a minute. So we're going to go through, and again, this is kind of just academic, really, just reminding you of these things. But again, this is the series, What is Sin? And this is part 11. And I had intentions of going to Galatians. Brother, I can't remember if it was during Sunday school or if it was last night. I don't remember. But in Galatians, was it chapter number 5, where he talks about the fruit of the Spirit. It also talks about the works of the flesh. And so I was going to spend some time there, but I think I've just about talked myself out of it. There are some new things there. You have witchcraft, variance, seditions, heresies there. There are some new things, so we may just focus on a few of the new ones. And so I'm not real sure. But tonight, let's start with verse number 1 of chapter 3, and we'll read the first 5 verses and get right into it. This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. And so to get right into it tonight, we'll start in verse number 2, the very last 2 words. Those are the ones that we're going to attack tonight. First of all is unthankful. Now, I know as parents, we all kind of run through this with our children. How that many times they become unthankful. They're ungracious, as it's defined. But going a little bit further than that, many times our children, they just don't see what they have, and so they're not thankful because they don't understand what they have. But this unthankful here, as I mentioned, it is ungracious, but if you dig a little deeper, they cannot be pleased. No matter what you give them, they cannot be pleased. Now, Paul says, I have learned in whatsoever state I am therewith to be content. And so it's not that he's just content to stay in the place that he is and never get any stronger, never know more about the Lord. But he simply says, where God places me, I'm going to be satisfied. I've learned to be content and thankful where He has me. If it's in the desert, I'm going to be thankful. If it's in the valley, that's where if it's on the mountain, I'm going to be thankful. And so on the opposite side of that, we find this unthankfulness here, or this ungraciousness, no matter what you give them. If you're in the valley and they're unthankful, and so then all of a sudden they're given all the water they need, all the food they need, the conditions improve drastically, they're still not satisfied with those things, and they cannot be pleased. This unthankful is only mentioned twice in the Bible, and so is unholy, as we'll see here in just a minute. But over in Luke chapter number 6, we find this second mention, or rather the first mention, really. It says, and if ye lend, we'll start reading verse number 34, and if ye lend to them of whom ye hope to receive, what thank have ye? For sinners also lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love ye your enemies, and do good, and lend, hoping for nothing again, and your reward shall be great, and ye shall be the children of the highest. For He is kind unto the unthankful and to the evil. Now, we see here in this verse 35 that he's talking about the highest from this verse. And he says that Christ, God, if you will, is merciful even to the unthankful. And so let's go back to that child that is unthankful. They may be unthankful, but you're still going to buy them that drink if they're thirsty. You're still going to provide their basic needs, and God provides the basic needs even for those that are unthankful. But next we find the word unholy at the very end of verse number 2. Quite simply, this is one that you just look at, okay, well, I know what that means. Well, it's simply, it is that one that is wicked. And again, it's only mentioned twice in the Scripture, in the New Testament, and the first mention is in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse number 9. Knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous man, but for the lawless and disobedient, for the ungodly and for sinners, for unholy and profane, for murderers of fathers and murderers of mothers, for manslayers. And so again, the law there in 1 Timothy chapter 1 said that law, that Old Testament law that was given for those that are wicked. It wasn't given for righteous men, because we know out of Romans chapter 3 verse number 10, there is none righteous. No, not one. And so, again, very simple. He says in the context of our message, these sins, these shortcomings, if you will, include those things that are unholy, and those that are unthankful. Now, it's hard for us in 2022 to consider unthankfulness a sin. But when you look at the grand scheme of things, look at what he says in verse number 5. All of this is continuing. It's one continual thought from verse 1 down to verse number 5. And he says, from such turn away. Now, you and I can kind of think back. Maybe there was a coach in school. Maybe there was a special teacher. Maybe there was a Sunday school teacher, or maybe a youth leader, something like that. They gave the instruction that we need to be careful of who we hang around with, because we will become like the people that we hang around with. And you hang around with those that are unthankful, guess what you're going to become? You too will become unthankful. You hang around those that are unholy or disobedient to parents or boasters, you're going to become those things. So again, Paul is telling Timothy, you need to stay away from these people. Then he says in verse number 3, it says, without natural affection. We've dealt with that already. But then the next word is truce breakers. And these are those that cannot be persuaded to enter into covenant. You cannot be persuaded. Now, if you remember back in, I think maybe it was here, I can't remember. It talks about implacable. One of the books that we've looked at is implacable, and this is almost the same word, and it means that if there is a covenant, no matter, kind of ties in with this unthankfulness, no matter the conditions, you will not go into covenant with someone. And if you ever do, you will be the first one to break it. So in other words, no one can depend on your word. You can't give your word. You can't promise something, because you will always be found wanting. The next word, I find kind of peculiar. The next phrase, it is this false accuser. Now, if you have ever looked at a concordance, it can be very confusing. But if you ever look at one, you'll find maybe you want to look up false or you want to look up accuser. But if you look at it, you'll find that false accuser is actually one Greek word, and it is the word, and some of y'all that have listened, has anybody ever listened to Patch the Pirate? Anybody ever remember Patch the Pirate? I know Leah had. Alright, so y'all might remember one of the episodes, I can't think of what it is, I think it's the Road to Mount Zion or something like that. there was the bad guy, and he was Diabolos. Anybody remember that one? So Diabolos is the Greek word for Satan. Okay? This is this word. False accusers. It is the Greek word for Satan, Diabolos. Okay? So now, take that into consideration of our lives. If you are a false accuser, Paul compares you to Satan. Does that make sense to y'all? He compares you. So I said this the other day that in the book of Revelation, the enemy, the devil, is called the accuser of the brethren. And he is going to bring up lies and maybe even truths that have been forgiven. But he's going to bring up these things and he's going to accuse the brethren. And so Paul says to Timothy, you need to beware of false accusers. If I could say it like this, we've mentioned that a Christian is kind of defined as a little Christ, a Xerox copy of Christ. That's what we should be. And so Paul uses that same illustration and he says a false accuser is a little Satan. Think about that for a minute. Pretty certain she don't listen. My pastor growing up had two daughters. One was sweet as pie and the other one wanted you to think she was. But she was a devil. She was always getting into trouble. She was brought before the church by her own daddy several times. I'm talking about she was bad to the bone. And she would lie. Kurt, I'm talking about would lie. And didn't care. And she'd lie to cover up that lie and just, on and on. And it got to the point, and I've kind of made this statement before, she could tell you that this carpet was red. I wouldn't believe it. I'd believe this was yellow before I'd believe her. I think she got herself right now, but what she was a little Satan. She was a false accuser. She was a liar. And so, again, Paul tells Timothy, you need to turn away from these. Don't hang around these. Stay away from them. This Diabolos, Satan, it is one that is prone to slander. It is one that slanders to damage a reputation. He is the accuser of the brethren. He is as a roaring lion. What is he doing? He's seeking whom he may devour. He wants to damage you. It is one that damages a reputation. The next word is this. And you don't have to laugh. It's in the Bible, but it means kind of what you think it means. Incontinent. Now, not being dirty, but if you're incontinent tonight, that's not a sin. Okay? If you adults know what I'm talking about. But this incontinent here, it is one that has no self-control, or they are powerless. I feel the best way to illustrate this is that person that is so close to doing wrong, they can't help it. It's almost as if, Hunter, they are on the verge of wrong all the time. And when they fall into wrong, their excuse is, well, I couldn't help it. From such turn away, he says. So this is that one that is powerless. They are quick to be persuaded. They're quick to jump to a conclusion. There's a man, some of you may know him, Joey Wampler. If you went to Brother Reese's meeting in December, you may have met him. He didn't preach or anything, but he was there. He is probably the best that I have ever seen that is able to play devil's advocate, and he does it for a reason. You can get on a biblical conversation and And he will take the opposite view that you have, and he will try his best to convince you that you're wrong. Knowing full well you're right, and he believes right. He's just taking that devil's advocate stance on it. But I have heard him tell about other preachers that he is convinced that they were wrong. Brother David, they were standing firm on the Bible. I mean, they had it down pat. But because they were easily convinced or persuaded, they faltered. And so he had to come off of his devil's advocate and said, okay, all right, now let's take what we've learned here. You were right all along, but you see how easily you were persuaded in another direction. So you probably will never really find me debating things. There's a lot of debates going on now. It seems like the one that's constantly is either music, the contemporary movement, the Bible, King James Bible only, or something like that. And just in case I'm not contemporary, I am King James only at the house, in the yard, behind the pulpit, everywhere. What was the other one? I said music. I want to say I only listen to Southern gospel music, but I just got some new music emailed to me today, and it's absolute trash. So I'm really having an issue with Southern gospel music right now too. I think I'm just going to go back to psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. I think that's where I'm going to end up. But just so you know, that's where I stand on those things. But people will try to invite you into these debates, if you will, to try to get you to turn, to be swayed to their point of view. Here's my issue is, and they probably have this same issue, is I feel I'm right according to God's Word, and I feel I'm right according to what God has placed in my heart. And therefore I have no need to debate. I believe what I believe. There's no sense in me trying to argue. Many of the people that I have entertained this quote unquote argument with, they've never been persuaded to put up their NIV or whatever and go to the King James Bible. They've never been persuaded to put up their more contemporary ways and go to the old-fashioned ways. They've never done it. But when you find this happening, you'll often find someone that holds to the King James Bible very quickly, very easily, leaving the King James Bible and going to something else. Or you'll find them dropping their standards of worship or whatever you want to call it, and they'll begin to let little things in until they're full-blown outside of the old-fashioned way of worship. And so I make a choice that I'm not going to argue about those things. One, because I don't want to be persuaded, just in case my faith is weak at the time, but also because I don't want because I know that likely I'll not persuade them. So it's just a waste of breath. And so when you get to this point and you find somebody that is incontinent, again, without self-control or quick to be persuaded, be very careful around them. Because one, if you can persuade them just like that to believe the way that you want, someone else will come by and persuade them to believe the way they do. Okay? We were talking, Brother Jody, last night, we were talking about, there's an event going down, downtown very similar to what, Brother Jody, has started in Lost and Found ministry. And they're going to have, games and they're going to have food and they'll have guest speakers and this, that, and the other. I don't know anything about it, so I'm not being, negative towards this, but I made the statement, I've heard it all my life. If you can get them in with a hot dog, you can get them out with a hamburger. Okay? Now, I don't have any problem with having a weenie roast and saying, hey, everybody come up in here. I'd be okay with a hot dog right now. But if that's the only thing that's getting them, what is going to keep them? That's That's kind of my mentality on that. Don't have a problem with having programs, but when your programs outweigh God, then we have an issue. So anyway, the next is the word fierce. So we go now we're towards the end of verse number 3, and it's this word fierce. This is savage. They are not tame. These people, they're just it's as if they have a one-track mind, and it's always on destruction. It's also on cruelty. This word savage is usually applied to someone that is cruel in their intentions and in their actions. And so there are people, believe it or not, and I know you believe it, there are people in the church that are cruel. Okay? We've all seen that. I was looking at a book by Brother Stennett Ballou, and it says how to deal with, what was the title of it? Something about being hurt. I can't even remember now. How to survive after being hurt, I think is the title of the message. And I didn't even open the book. I was just looking at it. And I can't tell you, I've been saved for 30 years, been in the ministry for November will be 29 years, been in the pastorate for over 15 years now, and I cannot tell you how many times I have been hurt, my family has been hurt, but we continue doing it. I could stop and I could cry about all the times that I've been hurt, or I can say, God, I'm going to give them to you. I'm going to give the pain to you. And I'm just going to move on because I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so you have some folks that are fierce. They are savage and cruel. And again, Paul says, from such turn away. The last one for tonight is despisers of those that are good. Despisers of those that are good. And I suppose probably the best way, and this is, I'll give you it is hostile to virtue. It's someone that's hostile to virtue. They are opposed to goodness, and they are opposed to men that are good. Probably one of the best ways that I could illustrate this is to say, you have someone that they have a need, but then it seems as though that need is met for someone else. And so the original person, they get upset, and then they begin to react to the person. Okay? And so, let's say for instance, Nathan, let's say I'm wanting a vehicle, a certain type of vehicle, a Tesla. Okay? Give me a Tesla model. One that you want. X, Tesla X. Don't have no door handles, right? Maybe. So I want a Tesla X. Let's flip it. Let's say that's what you want, okay? Because clearly it is. You can be driving down the interstate, old boy a mile away, Tesla! I'm like, what? Here's Tesla, 3/4 of a mile up the road. I have no idea how it's on. You're wanting a Tesla. What color? Gray. Got a pinstripe down it with your signature right in the middle. Perfect. It's yours. That's what you want. But all of a sudden, I get it. And I scratch out Nathan and I put Jamie on it. And then you've been wanting this for so long. You've been saving. You've been working for it. But then I get it with no care in the world, and you begin to get angry at me. And you quit working at what you were trying to get. You give up on your goals. And so this, despisers of those that are good, there is no good in them. Because they despise everyone else's good. And oftentimes these lend to one another. Those that are unthankful will become unholy. Those that are unholy will become truce breakers, and so on down the line. And so we've come down through all of these, and now these fierce, incontinent, false accuser, truce breaking, unholy and unthankful people, now they are despisers of those that are good. In other words, there's no, and again, we know that there's no good in man. We understand that. There's none righteous. We understand that. But if there's any moral good in them, it's gone because of the things that they subjected themselves to. And now, any shred of goodness in you, they despise it. Again, Paul tells Timothy, of such turn away. Now that's all I'm going to do tonight. I just want to read this last part. Verse number 4 and verse number 5. Next week we won't be in here. We'll be in the fellowship hall. It says, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. I would encourage you tonight to be thinking about those last two verses, especially that very last part that says that they have a form of godliness, but they deny the power thereof. Be thinking about that. And there may come people to your mind that fall into that category. And so I encourage you to take those verses, take the message home with you tonight, and be back on Sunday for Sunday school at 10 o'clock. All right?